Ben Gillenwater is a 30-year cybersecurity expert, father, and founder of Family IT Guy. Prior to creating his family digital safety platform, Ben served as chief technologist for a $10 billion IT company and built global scale systems for enterprise clients. He balances deep technical expertise with practical parenting wisdom, having navigated the same digital challenges many families face today. He creates research backed, step by step guides on managing technology's impact on child development without requiring parents to have technical backgrounds. Ben is passionate about empowering families to navigate the digital world safely and provides accessible resources through his website, familyitguy.com, where he shares his proven strategies for keeping children safe online while fostering healthy digital habits. Hi, Ben. Thank you for talking to me today.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start. I know you're a safety expert first and foremost. So I want to kind of touch on that topic first. So
Sure.
Jonathan Haidt, who is the author of the best-selling Anxious Generation, he says that kids are overprotected in the real world and underprotected in the digital world. So my question is, do you agree with this sentiment and why?
Yes, I certainly do. And I think it's a great quote. I think it's spot on. I think one of the reasons is that until maybe 15, maybe 20 years ago, parenting throughout human history has pretty much been the same. And then now there's a new topic where it's like you have to have an IT degree to be a parent.
Yeah.
You have to know all this stuff. And so basically, like if we look at protecting our kids in the real world or the online world or anywhere, in order to do that, we have to have an understanding of what the risks are. What are we protecting them from? And then how do we protect them from those things? And so kids being underprotected in the online world makes a lot of sense because most people, I don't know what the percentage is, probably in the 90s, high 90 percentages, I would guess, have no idea what the risks are, let alone how to manage them or mitigate them.
Yeah.
So the quote is perfectly spot on, and I think it's actually analogous to why I do what I do. You know,
Hmm.
because my mission is to help educate and inform parents so that they know what the risks are, where those risks are, and most importantly, if you can do something about them, what is it that you can do specifically?
Yeah. Um, that's so, I think parent overwhelm is a topic that comes up over and over and over again when I talk to every
Yeah,
single expert, and I don't blame them.
yeah,
I'm in the tech industry and I know you are as well, came from that. And I find it overwhelming and I can't keep
yeah,
up with everything. And I find the controls hard to set up. And so I can't imagine just
yeah,
being a regular person that is not tech savvy having to deal with all this. Not to mention the kids are always going to be two steps ahead of you, right? Because
they
we're digital
will.
immigrants and they're digital natives. So it's
Yeah.
really, really tough. So yeah,
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I think the
yeah,
overwhelming thing is spot on because it's already overwhelming enough
yeah,
before all the tech stuff.
yeah,
Nobody has a bunch of extra cycles to be like, let me think about an entire new area of expertise and spend all my spare time studying it and figuring it out.
yeah,
So,
yeah. No, it's crazy.
yeah,
Okay, so let's push on this a little bit more, and I'm going to give you a little bit of data, which I'm sure you have seen as well. So, if you look at both FBI and BJS data, so those show dramatic declines in US crime rates since the early 1990s. So, this is what we were talking about earlier with real world versus virtual. So, violent crime specifically has fallen 71% between 1993 and 2022. Meanwhile, online crimes against children are increasing exponentially. So there was a 144% increase just year over year. This was 2019 to 2020, and that's according to the FBI Internet Crime Center report. So, can you walk through some of the main types of online crimes against children?
yeah, I can tell you the ones that I've heard of and become familiar with and have sometimes had me crying at my desk reading some of these stories.
Yeah.
The first one that comes to mind is the sexual exploitation of children.
Hmm.
And this is done in different ways and by different types of evil people. But the basic nature of it is that when anybody goes on the internet, they're connecting to a system that has currently about 6 billion other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's my experience, and it seems to be the case, that a percentage of those people are intending harm to
Mm-hmm.
others and are they're there to seek victims. And so when you connect people in that way, that's what happens in some cases. And so some of these people will find kids, they'll pose as kids and connect with the kids and chat with them and talk to them and build trust and effectively convince them that, like, I'm just like you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also in middle school. I'm also in high school. Here's something of value that I'll give you, or here's a naked picture of me. Now, why don't you send me one back?
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that the kid sends one back, then they find out that the person on the other side is not a kid, but is in fact an adult. And then they start being blackmailed. This results in severe mental health issues and trauma. It results in money being transferred. Sometimes it results in sex trafficking, where kids are within their local towns being trafficked without their parents even knowing about it. And then the most distant form is a form of blackmail where it's just like, unless you send me money, I'm going to share your photos with everybody you know, and I'm going to shame you. And some kids commit suicide because of this stuff. So
Yep.
that's the big one. That's, I think the FBI says that that's the fastest growing crime against young people.
Yep.
Um, so that's the one that comes to mind first, and that's the one that I find is most impactful from a traditional, if you want to call it like a criminal perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's another aspect that is not technically criminal. However, I'm okay with considering it as such given its nature. And that is the entities that intentionally addict kids to their technology.
Mm-hmm.
So companies that produce technical systems, most social media platforms are guilty of this,
Mm-hmm.
knowingly and in fact purposely building their things in a way to attract and then keep kids on their dopamine feed and on their drug.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are the two things that come to mind.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I mean, we're dopamine, right? So we're teaching
Yeah.
kids all about how this works in the reward system and everything else. I've never heard it referred to as a crime. I think that's really interesting. I don't know if you know who Laura Marquez Garrett is. Um,
Not
they
sure. The
are
name
one of
sounds
the
familiar.
lawyers from Social Media Victims Law Center, I think is the correct
Oh,
name.
interesting.
So
Yeah.
they are going after or trying to go after the social media companies who are protected by Section 302, which I'm sure you've heard of as
Yeah.
well, which somewhat exempts them from some of these harms. But one of the
Yeah.
things that they told me in the interview was the number one harm that they address is the addiction portion. And, social media is not labeled an addiction yet. Um, I have my own theories as to why, but
Yeah.
I mean, what you're saying is sort of resonating with what they told me in the interview, which was that was their number one for harm, that they were seeing to children, and they prosecute or tried to prosecute the worst of the worst of crimes, drugs, sex exploitation, as you're describing, um, harms from challenges, like dangerous challenges, like everything you can think of. But the addictive portion was number one. So I think that's really interesting that you kind of framed that as a crime. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
obviously
certainly.
it's very widespread and probably not paid attention to enough, maybe, or accepted as the status quo, maybe. But yeah,
The status quo thing, I think, is it. I think it's easy to take things for granted when they're considered to be normal,
yeah.
especially when we're the ones leading the charge in being addicted to these things ourselves
Hmm.
and taking it for granted for ourselves. It's only natural that our kids would follow suit.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing. We do talk about modeling a lot. And I don't think parents realize. And when when I do the parent eds, it's probably the thing that they want to hear the least, right? Which is that your habits will trickle down to your kids. I mean, we have studies that show this. It's pretty obvious, but it is
Yeah.
also proven with studies that if you have problematic use, it is going to trickle down to your kids, and you have to
Yeah.
model the behavior you want to see. So, but you're right. I mean, it's a challenge for all of us, no matter how old we are. Um,
Well,
is,
and I think there's a beauty in the opportunity that's in that problem, in this
Mhm.
problem, because the problem is so big and so relatively simple in nature that it's a problem that kids can digest. Because things that are heavily nuanced, especially for younger kids, I think are harder to digest.
Mhm.
But when things are simple, they're easier to digest. And for leading by example for parents and behavior modeling, it's not that in order to be effective, you must have an extreme, that you must go from being addicted to social media to having a 0% usage.
Yeah.
There's things you can do along the way. There's bite-sized chunks you can take to have a positive outcome and to show your kids that it's good and amazing to recognize an issue and then take achievable bite-sized efforts at actually tackling that problem
Mhm.
and making it doable, making it actionable.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like everything else, awareness is the first step, right? Like just being aware,
Yeah.
and it's still going to be difficult for a lot of people, especially kids with developing minds.
Yes.
But
The
yeah,
most difficult.
for sure. But yeah, if you set an awareness and attention and boundaries, boundaries are super important.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways we can do that. It does make a big difference, and we're really big
Yeah.
on also like this. We say all the time, technology is part of our lives. You know, it's almost like food, right? We have to learn how to have a healthy relationship just like we would have a healthy diet, right?
Yes.
So it's not
Yes,
going
that's right.
anywhere, and there are ways uh, to just be more conscious and mindful about how we use it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Embrace moderation.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, let's come back to safety for 1 second. So, the statistic is 84% of US parents use some form of tracking to monitor their kids. So, in some families, this extend to when kids leave for college or even get married. So, my question to you is, are kids safer because parents are tracking and monitoring their every movement?
My gut reaction is no. Monitoring and surveillance is okay. So I have a background in security. I've been a
Hmm.
professional security person for a long time. I've had jobs where my job was to sit in a room with people and come up with terrible things that could happen and figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And if we think about, you want to protect your house from getting burglarized, so you put up cameras. Now, cameras can be a visual deterrent, but if we just take they're a surveillance mechanism. And if we use that as an analogy to surveilling or monitoring a kid with technology, the surveillance doesn't prevent the crime. It
Hmm.
doesn't prevent the thing. It allows you to go back afterwards and have a reactive analysis, but it doesn't prevent the thing. What prevents the thing from happening, what prevents the event that you want to avoid in a security context is almost always training and education and transparency, which all sits on top of a foundation of common understanding of what is the problem we're trying to avoid?
Hmm.
Why is it a problem? How do we describe and identify that problem? Okay, are we all on the same page? Now that we're all on the same page, here's how we go about addressing it by what I'm about to teach you as my child. I'm about to educate you on some stuff. And I can't just educate you once. I need to do it on an ongoing basis in a way that's contextual for your mind and your spirit. And so it's easy to look at a surveillance device or a monitoring device and find comfort in, okay, I feel good because I can see them on a map.
Hmm.
But it's the real solution is deeper. The real solution is ongoing education and transparency and understanding.
Yeah. We talk a lot about this issue with our parents and everybody else. One thing that comes up all the time when I talk to the mental health professionals that we work with for dopamine is surveillance is actually anxiety inducing for both the parents and for the kids.
Yeah.
So even
Yeah.
though, like you talked about, like a sense of comfort or whatever, what we hear, and I think it's true, is it's actually more anxiety inducing to be constantly monitoring and following and checking and where are they, what are they doing? And it's not just
Yeah.
GPS tracking. We're talking about homework portal access and all these other ways
Oh,
that we can
oh yeah.
now, basically track everything our kids are doing,
Yeah.
and not just where they're going, right? So, but one of the things that we've been talking about a lot lately and has been coming up in recent interviews for me is kids are actually, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think, and other experts agree with me too, that kids are actually safer or safest when they can navigate the world without a device, right? I mean, like devices can get
Yes.
broken, they can get lost, they can get stolen. And you back to what you're saying about educating them, right? And the metaphor of the cameras not stopping the crime and all that. Um, a kid should like I'll give you an example. Like we went to Universal Studios with my daughter and her friend. We let them go on, a couple rides by themselves. We said, "Meet us here. If you can't find us, what should we do?" And we kind of came up with, well, ask somebody that works there, right? Like that's safer than asking, random person or whatever. Sure enough, after one ride, they couldn't find us. They knew exactly what to do. They were fine. Everything was okay. But had we relied on maybe just GPS tracking and something happened to that, in that case, they might have been less safe, right? So it's
Yeah.
resilience, it's problem solving, it's being able to navigate the world without it. To me, I think is actually even safer than the little dot on the map.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and any good security plan has multiple layers of security.
Yeah.
If a security plan has one layer, if you go, okay, I have a surveillance device, I'm done. There's a thing that I learned working with the military that probably a lot of people have heard. One is none, two is one.
Yeah.
You must always have a backup. And in the most secure environments, we have what we call a PACE plan.
Hmm.
That acronym is primary, alternate, contingent, emergency. What's your primary plan? What's your alternate plan? What's your contingency plan? And what's your absolute fallback emergency plan? And so that's four. And that's ideal, really. And so, yeah, so like if you are going to have a monitoring or surveillance device and you want to have that, I would say that that's not the primary or even the alternate. That's the contingency or the emergency.
Yeah.
The primary and the alternate is education and experience and exposure to risk.
Yeah. For sure. That's really interesting. Okay, so let's talk about cyberbullying, which is another one of these unfortunate topics that come up when we talk about safety. So, according to a 2024 World Health Organization study, it's 1 in 6 adolescents that have experienced cyberbullying, which is up 25% since 2018. This is another one that is going up like this on a chart. So, approximately 11% of adolescents have been bullied at school. And it has been widely documented that group text and social media actually leads to physical fights in schools.
Mm.
So, what can parents and school leaders do to address this mental health and safety issue?
Hmm. That's a wonderful question. It's something I've been wondering about myself, and so I'll kind of just share some of my thoughts and my gut reactions and my instincts on that. I think one of the reasons why cyberbullying is impactful, I think it's two things. I think one is that people feel like they can hide behind a keyboard,
Hmm.
right? We see this with the internet warriors and all the comments of all the videos and
Yep.
social media posts who, they're real tough behind the keyboard.
Yep.
But in fact, what they're projecting upon those that they're speaking rudely to and negatively about is that in fact they're often sad or afraid themselves.
Hmm.
And so I like to try to find empathy for the people that are acting out, especially with kids, because they're showing us that their experience is poor and they're letting us know that they're having a bad time themselves.
Hmm.
And then they try to put that on other kids and hurt other kids to make themselves feel better. And I think that I wonder if transparency and if like shining a light on the message threads would be impactful so that these things are not hidden and they don't just exist on the kids' devices after hours, but rather they end up being shown to all the classmates or to the school administrators, or maybe most impactfully to the parents that are involved so the parents can get together and have the kids get together and have a talk. Um, I just had a similar thing that had a very beautiful outcome with my son where it was not cyberbullying, but he has a teammate in jujitsu. And long story short, for many, probably good reasons, they weren't getting along and they were being mean to each other and actually like trying to, one was trying to hurt the other and all this kind of stuff. So I told him, I said, look, if you're having a problem with another kid or another person, the first thing you should always try to do is have a conversation.
Hmm.
So have you tried to have a conversation? He's like, I did. I asked him to stop. He didn't stop. Okay, cool. Do you mind if I facilitate a conversation? So I went to jujitsu with him because usually my wife takes him. And then after class, we had a conversation together, and the kids are cool with each other now. They had a
Hmm.
hug, and now they respect each other. So there's something there, I think, with just shining a light on the thing and like not having it maintain its existence in the shadows. And how exactly to do that, I'm sure, is very context specific. But that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's a lot harder to be mean like that in person, right? When you're looking somebody in the
Yeah.
eye and getting all those other nonverbal cues and kind of tapping into the
Yeah.
energy. So there's definitely something there. I talk to a lot of school administrators with my work, and this is one of the biggest hot topics because what's happening is the deans, the school leaders, basically every Monday are dealing with drama from that happened with group text or social media over the weekend. And the
Yeah.
problem is there's no boundaries, right? So these kids are all friends at school. So it's whatever's happening online is just sort of coming now and translating into in person. So it's like they
Yeah.
feed each other basically. So it's really tricky because at the end of the day, is it the school's responsibility to police what's going on personal devices?
No,
Not really,
definitely not. No.
but if it's
Yeah.
affecting the kids in person that are coming into their school, it kind of becomes their business. So,
Yeah,
and then a lot of
exactly.
the,
It
a lot of
enters
the
the
social
school.
emotional things that you talked about, the example of your son, the deans are doing that work in person with the
Yeah.
kids. So it's just, back to the workload. It's just creating so much extra workload for schools
Yeah.
as well, and parents too, if you get involved.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you
That's for
feel
sure.
feel about phone checks, but for me, and this is we have like a device agreement contract template for parents, but
Excellent.
to me, phone checks are like critical. You have to, if you're going to hand your kid any technology, and if we're talking about group texts, you need to be reading those texts. You need to be involved in catching these issues, and it's work. So you better kind of
Yeah.
like be prepared to do that work. But to your point, yeah, us as parents, school leaders, we can definitely step in and help. And once you get these kids together in person, it becomes a lot harder, for them to continue this
Yeah.
behavior because the humanity steps in, the empathy steps in, and all that. So,
Yeah. Now, and that's also like sometimes, right? Because sometimes it doesn't, and then sometimes it persists. And
yeah,
that's where we need to be really proactive as parents in, are we setting up our kids for success by allowing them to have their phones in their bedrooms,
right.
by allowing them to use their phones after a certain hour?
Hmm.
Because whether they explicitly realize it or not, even the smartest kids, they're carrying that bully in their back pocket.
Yeah.
Their bully is in their room. Their bully is in their bathroom. Their
Yep.
bully is messaging them while they sleep.
Yeah.
And so I think the family tech agreement thing is amazing because setting expectations is key. If you're going to get your kid a car, you don't just hand them the keys with no training and
Yeah.
off they go. If you're going to get your kid a phone, you shouldn't hand them the keys without training and off they go. And part of the training is expectation setting. I think having a written formalized agreement is nice because it's clear. And then you can set them up for success and say, hey, let's not volunteer you to be tortured. Let's actually allow you to have some mental space and have this device just be in a different room because you do need solace
Yeah.
and in many ways. But I think that's a big thing with respect to the bullying thing. It's like, let's not let the bullies just like be attached to our kids 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point you just made is so key and something I've talked to other experts about before, which is the supercomputer in your pocket 24 hours a day. There's no respite. There's no respite for any
Yeah.
of it. So we're talking about bullying, but even just maintaining your online self or writing people back, like these kids, and I see it. My son is 12 now, finally got him like an Apple Watch just a couple months ago, and we're already
Oh
seeing
yeah.
issues with group texts and things like that. But these
Wow.
kids, they're not taught screen etiquette. They're not taught what's appropriate. So it's a
No.
barrage of texts. There'll be hundreds of texts just in the course of a couple hours. Like that in itself is stressful, right? Just having all those
Yeah.
notifications and keeping up with that. But to your point about the bullying or any of these other issues that you and I grew up with, but we could go home at the end of the day and take a break from it. We could go home on the weekend. Usually, a lot of them would blow over by the time the weekend
Yeah.
came, right? But what's
Yeah.
happening is, and we say this all the time, like tech hasn't created these issues, but what it does is supercharges them. So it
It
allows the
does.
stuff to continue to breed and grow and evolve and multiply, and reverberate,
Yeah.
right? So it goes to the devices over the weekend, then everybody's amped up coming back in on Monday, upset. So it's just the cycle, but the respite.
Yeah.
And that's so true. We as parents need to create that. Kids will not do that on their own. No kid
Yeah.
they don't have a fully formed brain. They're not going to be able
Yeah.
to pump the brakes and say, oh, this is not making me feel good. I need a break. Like it's up to us to
Yeah.
put those boundaries in. So,
Well,
um,
and like on the Apple Watch and on Apple devices in general, and I think this also occurs on Google devices, you can actually filter who is allowed to text them and call them.
yeah,
And you can have a parent controlled contact list.
yeah,
So like now my son's younger than your 12-year-old. My son's 9.
uh-huh,
So we have him on a filtered contact list. So
yeah,
his classmates cannot text him or call him. So I think there's like for parents that are dealing with a bully situation and they're already deep in it,
yeah,
you can apply those restrictions, and then B, you can change their phone number.
yeah,
Because for adults, we don't want to change our numbers, so it's not really something that comes to mind because that's a big deal.
yeah.
But for a kid, who cares? Change a number.
That's
You
true.
tell grandma, you tell grandpa, you tell uncle, and you're good.
Yeah.
So
I will say, and I'm going to get to iPhone in a second, but their controls are not the best. And I will say, just from my personal experience, we had some issues with some kids bringing him into like a very problematic group text. And even after removing this particular kid from his contacts, because I do filter contacts as well,
oh yeah.
removing him from the conversation, they were able to keep adding him over and over. Even though that number
Oh
was not, there's all
really?
these loopholes where,
Ah,
you think
yeah.
you can lock it down, but then
Yeah.
that same kid that was problematic is now back in this group chat, even though he's
Yeah.
not in his contacts. So there's so many
Yeah.
things that, and not to mention the kids and the workarounds, which I actually want to kind of get to next, if you don't mind. So
Yeah.
let's
Well,
jump into
actually, so
that.
one
Yeah.
one quick little thing on the phone number blocking.
Yeah.
When you block the numbers through software, there's workarounds. And I've had weird, like, there's an adult woman at the park that's been like leaving my son voicemails
Oh boy.
because one of the loopholes is that she can't call, but it'll let her leave a voicemail.
Oh,
And so what I found out as a result is that the cell phone companies, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, if you go to them and you say, "Hey,
oh,
block
okay.
this number," that blocks the number.
Oh,
Like
that's good to know.
there's no getting through that. So if you have a problematic contact, do it through the carrier and then it'll really be blocked.
That's good to know. That's a good tip. Okay, well, let's talk about iPhone a little bit more then. So
Yeah.
According to the latest statistics that I have anyway, 87% of teens own an iPhone, despite Steve Jobs himself
Wow.
not letting his own kids use iPads or iPhones.
Yeah.
Apple parental controls have had very public loopholes, including a bug that let children visit X rated websites. I'm sure you saw that one.
Yeah.
So, if parents do choose to give their kids this adult product, what are your tips for making iPhones and iPads as healthy, as safe, and as possible? We talked a little bit about it, but what would be
Yeah.
your key tips?
Well, you've asked the right person because I've focused on this a lot. I actually wrote an 83-page guide for parents on how to lock down an iPhone with every screenshot. I mean, it took me months to create it. And you have to be careful. There's a lot of settings, there's a lot of things. They're not all described in obvious ways, and some of them are hidden in this corner and that corner. But I would say that setting up an iPhone is, I'll actually just talk about setting up any internet connected device that is portable, and maybe even the ones that aren't. So, first is when you give a device to a kid, that is your opportunity to set a precedent and to set an expectation. And I like the idea of taking that opportunity to present the device in a fully restricted form so that it is purpose built to do specific things. In the tech world, we call them use cases. What are your use case? Okay, you need access to this thing to write your homework. You need access to these things to do your research. And you need access to this thing to submit your homework. Those are 3 use cases. And so when you hand them a device out of the box, it has all the use cases. It has 100% of the functions. And so the first thing I recommend is using the controls that are built into the device. Screen time, family link, they all have their pros and cons, some really special ones on both of them. But definitely start there because remember, you need multi-layers of security, right? So that's one layer. Make the device boring. Turn the screen to black and white. Turn off all the notifications. Set the headphone limits so that they can't blast their eardrums out, which, sorry, kids, because I've done that and my ears suck now. So, you know, and go through and make it so that they can't install apps. Make
Mm-hmm.
it so that they can't delete the apps that you've intentionally put on the phone. Restrict it completely. Make it so that if they want when it's new, when you're giving something for the first time, make it in a whitelist mode, not a blacklist mode, which means in the tech industry, the whitelist is what are the list of things you're allowed to do? And then you can't do anything else. Whereas as the kids get older, you want to switch them to a blacklist mode, which means you can do everything except what's on the blacklist. And so I like to start off with a whitelist. Make the phone boring, make it a tool and not a toy, and establish expectations on where it can be used and when it can be used. And if those expectations are not met, then you have the opportunity to follow through and take it away or do whatever you want to do. But I think making it boring and making it very purpose built, it's a perfect opportunity to do that so that you're not just handing them an open platform with unfiltered internet and the potential to access social media and all these things that have a net negative to a child's development. And instead, you can use the tools that are built into to lock it down.
I love the one thing stood out, which is that your guide is 83 pages, which
Yeah,
thank you for doing that. But wow, like the fact that you have
yeah,
to do
it's
that
a lot.
says so much about how much work this is and
Yeah,
how it shouldn't be that complicated, to be honest with you,
right.
right? We shouldn't be
That's right.
then to write 83 pages about how to do this,
Yeah,
right? Um,
yeah,
I
that's
think the
right.
simplest thing, I love that you said this because I've never really phrased it this way, is to make it boring. Because we talk a lot about like putting the friction back in because what's happened with technology is and it's good, right? It's advanced to the point where everything's so easy, everything comes to you so easily, you can get the whole world in your pocket, right? And I
Yeah,
thought a lot about that when I set up my son's, even his Apple Watch. Like I stripped it down to talk and text. I did what you said where he can't download apps. Like in my head, I was thinking about making it boring without thinking about those words, but I knew the
Yeah.
more I put into it, the more of his attention, it would grab. And I also
Yeah.
knew like things like the App Store encourage kids to just constantly seek, right? So if I knew he could search and ask for more apps, like that was going to take more of his time as well. So,
Yeah.
but I
That's
love
right.
that simple premise of like, make this something that you don't even want to use. Is really interesting. But at the end of the day, I mean, the iPhone's the most powerful tool, probably, I would argue, more powerful than even a computer because you take it with you.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
really hard to dumb that thing down, and I know parents
Yeah.
do it, but I often think, like, why get an iPhone if you're going to strip it down that much? Like, why not
Yeah.
get one of these kid
Well,
alternatives, which we haven't talked about, but go ahead.
I'll tell you, I have very specific thoughts on that actually. And
Yeah.
I actually advise that parents, when they choose a device, for me, the iPhone is actually at the top of the list.
Okay.
Now, when you want it to be a smartphone and not a watch, right? So actually, at the top of the list is always a watch because watches have the least features and
Yeah.
they don't have cameras
Mm-hmm.
because you can't have sextortion if you don't have a camera.
Yep.
So on an iPhone, okay, in a computing device, part of security, there's three parts of security. The acronym is CIA, which is just easy to remember. It's confidential, it has integrity, and it has availability. Availability means that it works when you want it to work. And the iPhone is far and above the highest quality device that you can put in your pocket. It is built to standards. So I used to assess the ways that computers were built because I oversaw the purchase of hundreds of thousands of them. So I'd go visit the manufacturing facilities and I found out the particulars of how computers are assembled and tested and built and soldered and all this stuff. Apple products are miles beyond every other product that's available. They are built to such a high standard, and so their reliability is very high. And so I think that's a key thing to consider when you get a device for yourself or your kids is you want it to work. And the
Mm-hmm.
iPhone will be the one that works the most. And then strip it down. Yeah, turn off the internet. You can turn off the internet on an iPhone. You can turn off the camera. You can turn off the App Store. Make that thing a boring little brick. But when they want to use it or when they need to use it for that emergency phone call, it'll work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess I just go back to why buy $1,000 talk and text thing, I think I
Yeah.
just go back to that. Like I totally
Yeah.
agree, hands down for adults. And yeah, it's far superior. I just
Well, buy
wonder
buy
about
a
that
used
part.
one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, buy a used SE, the cheapest one on like Swappa. Have you heard of Swappa?
No, but
I
that's
love it. It's
yeah.
like it's like a secondhand marketplace for electronics and smartphones.
Okay.
SWAPPA. I've used them a bunch. I think it's the best secondhand marketplace. Go on Swappa, get the iPhone that's $200. Don't get the ones and 200 is still a lot of money,
Yeah.
but it's better than 1,000,
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I think what you've described, and the one thing about making it boring and starting very small and then adding, I mean, that is definitely what we recommend as well. So yeah, I guess I can come along with you. I've always said iPhones are not for kids; they're for adults, and that's just because they're
Yeah.
designed for. And
Well,
I
that's
always,
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I always go back to, if you have to put a parent control on it at all, it's not designed for that audience, right? So I tend to recommend, like, Bark and some of these devices that are actually built for kids, and they're built to build onto, where iPhone, you need the 83 pages to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just, not to extend this too long, but
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize the incentives that exist in the products that you purchase. And
Hmm.
so Google products are advertising tools,
Hmm.
right? Their existence, the reason that Google bought Android, they didn't always own Android, but now they do. They paid billions of dollars for it so that they could gather data to better serve you ads.
Yeah.
And the parental control tools exist on top of that. So like the Bark and Gab and all these, which I like all what they're doing,
Yeah.
but the basic premise is that they sit on top of an advertising platform.
Mm.
And because Google is an advertising company, they're not a tech company.
Uh-huh.
Apple is they're a product company.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good delineation to draw. And so from a privacy perspective, I think it's just worthwhile considering that the tools might be on a certain device, but then that device is inherently problematic in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point of view. No, that really is true. And Apple has, for sure, out of all of them, I think at least tried, to be
Yeah.
more privacy centric. So that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Uh,
they've actually disrupted the entire tracking industry. When they released iOS 14, they crushed Facebook's stock value
yeah,
because
I remember
their
that.
tracking script stopped working.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was amazing. Like
Yeah.
Apple has done wonderful stuff for privacy.
Yeah, and that's true. Incentives, they want to sell stuff, things, products,
Yeah.
right? They're not
Yeah.
necessarily selling software. So true.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I took you so long, but can I ask you one more quick thing, hopefully? Although it's
Please.
a
Yeah,
big
take your time. Yeah.
question, but it's such a buzzword. I would love to know what you think are some new safety issues that parents should look out for with the rise of AI. So, I mean, most recently, I can think of the chatbots that Google and Meta both announced that they're going to be rolling out, including to kids under 13 even.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know
Yeah.
it's a big question, but maybe give me your key
Yeah.
safety
Yeah.
recommendation.
I'm very involved in the space and I have a lot of thoughts, but the core thought, the number one thing that comes to mind is this is where, like you mentioned, social emotional
Hmm.
skills,
Yeah.
social emotional learning. That concept is key here. So, social emotional learning is where kids learn skills instead of rules. And AI, this is absolutely fundamental. Before a kid and an adult, by the way,
Mhm.
uses an AI system, they must be able to demonstrate critical thinking skills
Mhm.
and healthy skepticism. Because something I want to express to people, and this is going to sound extreme, and maybe it is, but nonetheless, I believe it's true. The output of an AI system in its current state in May of 2025 should be considered fraudulent by default.
Yeah.
The large language model generative AI systems, that's what we usually talk about as AI right now. Generative AI systems that use large language models are not in the business of delivering truth or delivering useful information. They're in the business of solving very complicated math problems to assemble words in a way that looks like they were assembled by a human.
Mhm.
The way that those words are assembled is not incentivized by accuracy or honesty. And the companies that make these tools have publicly written papers where they tell us specifically that they have injected their personal biases
Yeah.
into the way that the information is presented. So I like to tell people that AI is a proxy to viewing information that already exists on the internet.
Mhm.
So it's as if you could ask your encyclopedia a question instead of reading the encyclopedia.
Yeah.
It's a proxy to existing information. That proxy has been played with and toyed with by the developers of the AI system to such an extent where they'll tell you that George Washington was a black man.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, these things are very problematic, especially for children.
Yeah.
Children should not be exposed to these systems until they can demonstrate critical thinking skills and the ability to apply healthy skepticism.
And to know things. I mean, I use it every
Yeah.
day as a tool, and every day I catch it making something up. I only use
Yes.
it to help me, if I'm writing something long form, fill in the gaps, save some space. But
Yeah.
it, I mean, it is astonishing how much it makes up.
Yeah.
And I have to know the subject matter that I'm using it to help me write, because I use it as like a writing aid, basically.
Yeah.
I have to know that. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it will just I mean, I don't know what would happen if I hadn't caught it in all these lies. They're called
Yeah.
hallucinations, just for
Yeah.
people who
Right.
don't know.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, I can't imagine for a kid who's still learning all this stuff, just things, facts, how the world works, history,
Oh,
all
it's
of that.
terrible.
I
Yeah.
can't
It's very
imagine
bizarre.
just the effect of that alone. So, not to mention we haven't gotten to the chatbots, but I think we're both
Yeah.
saying no, no for kids.
Yes. Uh, be aware, be
Yeah,
afraid, be skeptical.
yeah,
That's another one. You don't just give them the keys to the car. That car is way worse than a car. Like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
giving them the keys to that, boy, oh boy, that's very problematic. And it's horrific to me that these things are being recommended by influential entities
yeah,
and pushed upon kids. It is very short-sighted.
yeah. Um, Ben, hi, Smita.
Sorry.
The first time we're backing up too, so we're gonna say hi to
This is
I,
Smita.
amazing.
I'm
Let's
sorry.
let's let's be like
No, don't
merged
be
from one to the
sorry.
other.
This is
No, not
really
at all.
interesting. Ben and I were just wrapping up, and I was just about to
I'm
thank him
so
so much.
sorry. I can log off.
No,
I just
you're
thought I would
good.
It's
be on
amazing.
time.
That's so cool.
Thank you
Well, it's
so
nice to
much.
meet you. I hope you guys have a good chat.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben, so much for your time and for everything. Ben is a safety expert, Smita.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks
Likewise.
so much for your tips, Ben. I mean, I'm going to be implementing some of these things I learned on the Apple Watch like right away. So thank
Cool.
you for everything you're doing to make things easy for parents.
And thank you very much. I appreciate what you're doing as well. And, best of luck to you. And thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ben.